Hey, welcome to Wednesday, Transformation in 10. Glad you're connecting. I've been thinking today and want to share with you a word of hope. In the book of Romans, Paul calls God the God of hope. So I want to ask you, how are you in hope? Where's your hope level? Let me put it another way. What's your hope level? Do you feel strong in hope? At this season in your life, do you maybe feel like your hope has waned? If you're feeling like maybe you're not as hopeful as you used to be, that's all right. It happens. Sometimes we go through low places. But I want to give you encouragement today. In fact, normally we talk about principles of transformation. Today, I just want to encourage somebody. Sometimes you just need encouragement. Encouragement is the oxygen of hope. You see, the scripture says when hope is delayed, our heart gets sick. It takes us into an emotional valley or into a place where, we just don't feel powerful. But what I'm reminded as I look through the book is that regardless of how we feel, God's promises outlast every season. They transcend it. The covenant God has with you through his son Jesus and your faith in him, in his atoning death, and now you're part of the family of God. You go through the low places, but the low places can't keep you. You will not stay stuck in a hopeless place or in a place where maybe you're not hopeless, but maybe you just don't feel hopeful. Maybe you're not full of hope. There's reasons for that. It could be disappointment. It could be disillusionment. It could be stress. I don't know sometimes if we really are aware of how, when we're in a stressful season, how it impacts us on a hope level. And so maybe you need a recovery of hope today. My prayer for you is that you're going to get it, because you need to know that God is the God of hope. So hope may have been deferred in your life because of some things that haven't happened yet, some things that haven't come to pass yet. Perseverance is key to everything in the kingdom. Jesus said, whoever perseveres shall be delivered. So deliverance is connected to perseverance. Deliverance in the sense of the things that you're believing for, the things that you're pursuing for, the things you're going after. Hope does sometimes seem to get delayed. The answer seems to get delayed. The outcome seems to be just beyond our grasp. But when you're there, and you've got a covenant with God, you don't just have a covenant with a God who's out there somewhere. You have a covenant with a personal God who has a personal covenant with you. And by the way, Paul said he is the God of hope. So here's what I want to tell you today. There is a gift God gives each of us when we belong to him. There's something he plants deep in you. It's called the gift of divine resiliency. Yes, the gift of divine resiliency. I know when you look at the scriptures, you don't see, in the 9 gifts of the Spirit, you don't see the word resiliency. But I want to stretch your thinking today and look at it this way. In every major man or woman of God in the scriptures, they hit a low place where it seemed like, at some season in their life, sometimes more than once, but there are times when you really get in the book and you look at these great champions of God, the difference makers, the disruptors, people that God raised up to disrupt the status quo and bring his purposes to pass in the earth. Every one of them had places where they got deformed. The word resilient means to bounce back. The scientific definition means the ability of something that was deformed by stress that compressed it, that misshaped it, deformed it. You see this a lot in the scriptures, where it looks like people got deformed by enemies, by disappointment, by hopelessness, by failure. But when you're in covenant with the God of hope, you've got a covenant that where he gives you the gift of divine resiliency, you see the definition goes on to say it's the ability of something that's been deformed by compressive stress to recover its original shape. To recover its shape. So when the writer of Proverbs says hope delayed makes the heart sick, it brings us to a low place emotionally, spiritually. We just kind of feel like we're in a funk. There is a gift of divine resiliency. It means that what got deformed becomes transformed by a power that only God can give to rebuild you and reboot your hope. And lately we've been talking about Moses, and he's an incredible example of divine resiliency. At 80 years of age, he comes, think about what Israel must have thought when they see the Moses they hadn't seen in 40 years who left as a failure coming back with vision, passion, and a word from God about their future, and not just a word of hope, but a plan and a strategy and the power to make hope happen. You see, they had been crying out to God for a long time about their burden, about their bondage, about their captivity. They feel hopeless. God is meeting a man who's been deformed by the stress of failure, the stress of wrestling, the stress of disappointment. You see, the space between expectation and reality is conflict. The space between your expectations and your reality is called disappointment. That's where disappointment happens. And when we get disappointed, our hope wanes, especially if it becomes a protracted delay. So Moses is an example of that. You see, the cool thing about what God does when he gives us the gift of divine resiliency, he helps us bounce back. Today, somebody watching this needs to know you're battled, but you are not beaten. God has given you somewhere in the things that you're processing that maybe you feel deformed. Maybe a dream got deformed. Maybe a hope got delayed, and maybe you don't feel like the person you used to be. Well, let me tell you this, you're not who you used to be because you're becoming something you've never been. That's the gift of divine resiliency. We go through stripping because there's an equipping God is giving us. You will never emerge into a new season when God is building something dynamic and powerful and hopeful in your life. You will never enter your next season the way you exited your last season. And that's all right. That's okay. So, you need to know several things today. You have, even if you're feeling stressed out, maxed out, maybe you just feel exhausted, maybe you really feel hopeless. It is okay to not be okay. You need to know that. Because when you're in covenant with the God who gives us the gift of divine resiliency, he gives us what we need. He supplies, Paul said. God supplies all of our needs according to his riches, his overflow, his abundance. God's got resources that will resource you when you've been deformed by disappointment, by stress, by delays, by frustration, by warfare. When you've been deformed, God will resource you richly so that you're transformed and you bounce back because of divine resiliency. Joseph comes out of prison as an Egyptian prime minister. He went into it as a foreign slave. That is a bounce back. God's given you bounce back ability. So, what do you do while you're waiting to bounce back? Do what you can do and trust God to do what only he can do. Trust doesn't mean you have it all together. It means you're leaning on the one who's got unlimited resources to give you a bounce back. Somewhere in what you're processing right now, if you're feeling hopeless, disappointed, frustrated, things just seem like, man, barriers after barrier after barrier, and things seem delayed in your life, that's okay. Own that emotion. Process it. Deal with it. Don't try to ignore it. The worst thing you can do is to try to be super spiritual and not be real. Be authentic. God knows where you are. He knows the toll that your journey has taken. He knows when you're in a low place, and He's given you His promise. He's made covenant with you to give you a bounce back before your setback ever happens. You have, as a child of God, you have the gift of divine resiliency. And what I'm telling you today, you need to embrace this. And I would say take this on as a self-declaration straight out of the Scriptures. I may be battled, but I am not beaten. God's got a bounce back emerging in me. See, that's a word for somebody right now. And I'm going to say it again. I may be battled, but I am not beaten. Because I've got a bounce back that's emerging in me. The gift of divine resiliency is yours. God put it in you. You may not see it right now. You may not feel it right now. But you will bounce back out of your low place. Hope is making a strong comeback because the God of hope is going to fill you with all joy and peace in believing. And you've got the gift of divine resiliency. Your enemy and your doubters, your haters, the ones that have opposed the issues, the situations that have risen up as obstacles to try to oppose you, they have not seen the last of you. They're about to understand what it looks like when God gives His people the gift of divine resiliency.